Thank you, Dr. Rammohan. And I thank Chinmaya Civil Services Academy for inviting me to share a few points about the budget with all of you. I started reading the newspapers, when I was in the 9th standard. But though I have been reading for many years, I never got interested in budget, in the earlier years, because it didn't affect me in any way. Later, when I became a college student, I attended a couple of lectures by Dr. Nani Palkiwala. I don't know, some of you might have heard of his name, of course. I'm sure Dr. Rammohan and Mr. Subramaniam are aware of this. Nani Palkiwala was a constitutional lawyer and a taxation expert. He used to go around the country, used to visit major cities and give speeches on the budget every year. And that used to be very well received by the public and also reported widely in the newspapers. He was greatly regarded for his expertise on taxation matters. And then in 1965, the rupee was devalued. When Sachin Chaudhary was the finance minister, the rupee was devalued. It was a very big decision at that time. So we did not, at that time I had just been in college for a couple of years. We didn't really understand the implications. My uncle told me that the day after devaluation, he went to the market. And then he found that the prices of vegetables had gone up. So he asked that vendor, so he told him, sir, நீங்க பேப்பர் பார்க்கலையா? ரூபாய் மதிப்பு ரொம்ப குறைஞ்சிடுச்சுன்னு போட்டிருக்க பேப்பர்ல திடீர் வீழ்ச்சின்னு போட்டிருக்காங்களே. He would not have understood that the devaluation has nothing to do with the prices in the local, within the country. It affects only imports and exports. But that is a perception that people have about devaluation. And when the rupee was devalued, we all sat up and thought that, there is something in this, so we should know more about economics. And later on in 91, when we had that balance of payment problem, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Prime Ministership of Mr. Narasimha Rao, made a very path-breaking announcements regarding reforms. And that changed the complexion of the whole thing. Earlier, nowadays the character of the budget has totally changed. Earlier, practically everything used to be mentioned in the budget because the price of petrol and diesel will be increased, and the prices of most of the commodities, there will be some announcement or the other. When Morarji Desai was the finance minister in the late 60s and early 70s, he was a Gandhian and a no-nonsense person. And he did not like tobacco and totally against tobacco and alcohol. So he used to always target these two items in his budgets. Later on, other finance ministers, over the years, they have contributed their bit to the evolution of the budget. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, then Dr. Manmohan Singh, Mr. Chidambaram, all these people, during those earlier, in the around 2000, in the 90s and 2000, we switched over from the sales tax to value-added tax and then on to GST. Once GST was accepted by the states and it was implemented, more and more items were added to the GST. Mr. Chidambaram, I think, is responsible for bringing most of the items under the services sector, under the GST. With the result, practically everything, that it is taxed now by the government. Some 4 or 5 years ago, I, renovated one of the rooms in my house. It cost about 2 lakhs. I fixed up with the contractor that, I'll pay 2 lakhs for that. And when work was over, he presented a bill for 2,18,000. He said this 18,000 is the GST. 18%, of which 9% goes to the state and 9% goes to the center. So it is a work given by me to the contractor, which was executed by him. The state government gets 9,000 rupees, central government gets 9,000 rupees. Similarly, when you go to the hotel and eat your lunch or dinner, you pay GST. So practically everything is taxed. So taxation has become very, very important. Now, in the last few years, of course, now after the introduction of GST, the GST Council takes care of the rates and all that. And now petrol and diesel, now they have been delinked from the budget. Now the Oil Coordination Committee, because when the oil prices crashed in the early 70s, the Oil Coordination Committee was interested in the job of fixing the prices, and now it was linked to the market forces. So that is also out of the budget. So more or less, everything is now standardized. Now budget is only a few announcements here and there. That is why I don't understand why there should be so much excitement about the budget. I mentioned last year also when I said that, too much importance is being given to the budget. Now people like us, who are retired, who are in senior positions in government, now we were affected by the budget because we had to pay heavy income tax. So that is how I got interested in later years in the budget, because we pay a lot of income tax. Nearly 20% of our income, 20 to 25% of the income was going as tax to the government. So we used to look forward to the budget to see whether there is any announcement regarding rebate or any reduction in the tax. For the first time in several years, this year the finance minister has announced some relief for the middle class people and also some senior citizens. So that way I will talk about it. Dr. Ram Mohan, traced the history of the budget, from starting from Arthashastra. So I took off from the time of the early 60s, from the 50s. And now I have just given you a brief account of what has happened over the years. Now I will make my presentation of the budget in two parts. In the first part, I will talk about the economic survey. The economic survey was always part of the budget. It was first introduced in 1951. The first economic survey report was prepared in 1951. At that time, it used to be part of the budget document. Till 1964, it was part of the budget document. Only after 1964, the government decided that they will bring it out separately, and it was placed on the table of the House a day before the budget. That is how this year you will find that the budget was presented on 1st February and the economic survey was presented on 31st January. It is in two parts. The part A, it focuses on economic trends, key challenges, and policy recommendations that shape the government's approach to economic management. And part B provides detailed statistical analysis of various sectors. The economic survey is a very important document because it provides a comprehensive analysis of India's economic performance and outlines key challenges and opportunities for sustainable growth. Now, the report is prepared by the Economics Division of the Department of Economic Affairs in the Finance Ministry, Government of India. It's done under the guidance of the Chief Economic Advisor. You know who the Chief Economic Advisor now is? Dr. Anantha Nageswaran. He is the Chief Economic Advisor. He is the author of the report. Now, it's a very, very well drafted document which has been appreciated even by the opposition leaders, saying that it has been brought out nicely. And it gives the context, it says that the global growth slowed to 3% in 2023, with the IMF projecting an average of 3.2. This is the global scenario, 3.2 over the next 5 years. And the major issues are the rising trade protectionism. you are all aware of what is happening around the world. With people like Trump taking over as president of US, there is more and more protectionism in a very fierce manner, which is not good for the world. And China's dominance in global manufacturing, because 1/3 of the global output is from China. So these are posing major challenges in today's global context. India's economy has remained steady despite global headwinds, with real GDP growth pegged at 6.4% in FY25, that is 24-25, and expected to grow between 6.3 and 6.8 in next financial year. Next. Now our GDP annual growth rate from 1991 to 2024, at current prices, it is 8.4, current dollar prices, it is 8.4%. At current rupee prices, it is 12.5%. At constant dollar prices, it is 6.2%. Now, the economic survey says that it needs to increase to 8%, from 6.2% to 8%. The gross value added grew by 6.4%, driven by strong performance in construction, electricity, and utilities. Private consumption, final consumption expenditure grew by 7.3%, supported by a rebound in rural demand. Retail headline inflation softened to 4.9%, but food inflation rose to 8.4% due to supply chain disruptions and weather vagaries. Unemployment rate declined to 3.2% in 23-24 with improved labor force participation and worker to population ratio. This is something which I finding it difficult to accept. I don't know whether unemployment has really come down to decline to 3.2%.
Recording in progress.
Unemployment has really declined to 3.2%. It seems a very, very optimistic figure. Now coming to the sectoral analysis, the survey states that agriculture and allied activities contributed 16% to the GDP the last year in FY 23-24 and expected to grow at 3.8% in FY, that is in the current year, supported by record Kharif food grain production, that is 1647 lakh metric tons. And the survey says that it is very, very important that we have to intensify research to increase production of pulses, oilseeds, tomato, and onion to develop, climate resilient crop varieties. Coming to industry sector, it is estimated to grow by 6.2%, with strong performance in construction and utilities. Electronics production grew at a compounded annual growth rate of 17.5%. Textiles, pharmaceutical, steel, and automobile industries have witnessed steady growth. Meaningful market correction in US may have cascading effect in India. This is what the survey says about the industry sector. Coming to services sector, it says that there is a robust growth of 7.2%, driven by finance, real estate, and professional services. Services exports surged 12.8% in the period April to November 24. And the service sector, as many of you may be knowing, contributed 55.3% to total GVA in FY 24-25. Coming to fiscal health and capital expenditure. The capital expenditure grew by 8.2% with a focus on infrastructure development. You may be aware that there has been a strong emphasis on infrastructure development in the last few years, the last decade or so. And a lot of money has been pumped in the construction of buildings, roads, bridges, and then railway lines, etc. The capital expenditure grew by 8.2%. The gross tax revenue increased by 10.7%, but net tax revenue growth was modest due to higher devolution because from the gross tax revenue, the revenue is shared with the states. So quite a substantial amount has gone to the states, and because of this higher devolution, the net tax revenue has grown only modest in a modest manner. Then states' revenue expenditure grew by 12% in subsidies and committed liabilities driving spending. Coming to the external sector, the merchandise exports grew by 1.6%, while imports rose by 5.2%. Services exports and remittances supported a current account deficit of 1.2% of GDP in the second quarter of financial year 25. And foreign exchange reserves stood at $634 billion. This is quite a remarkable achievement over the years. We have built up our foreign exchange reserves steadily. There was a major crisis in 1991. We had very little foreign exchange left, but now the reserves have gone up, covering 10.9 months of imports and 90% of external debt. Next one. Coming to the banking and the financial stability, the gross NPA is non-performing assets, declined to a 12-year low of 2.6% of gross loans, and capital to risk-weighted assets ratio for banks stood at 16.7%, well above regulatory norms. Railway network expanded by 2,031 kilometers in April and November 24, with 17 new Vande Bharat trains introduced. Renewable energy capacity increased by 15.8%, driven by solar and wind power. This is another thrust area for the government. Port efficiency improved, with average container turnaround time reduced to 30.4 hours. And the survey goes on to say that public sector efforts alone cannot fully meet the requirements of infrastructure. Private participation in project financing, project planning, construction, maintenance, monetization, and impact assessment is very necessary. This is one of the major recommendations of the survey. It's coming to the social sector and health. Government health expenditure increased from 29% to 40 in 2015 to 48% in 2022, reducing out-of-pocket expenses. And social services expenditure grew at 15% annually, with initiatives like Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan and PM Poshan. Coming to MSME and deregulation, this is another important recommendation of the survey. The 50,000 crore self-reliant India fund launched to support MSMEs. It is critical for the government. This is the most important thing which has been picked up by many opposition leaders and also newspapers. It is critical for the government to get out of the way of businesses by undoing regulations that are tantamount to micromanagement. This is indeed the very strong words used by the chief economic advisor. Normally, government officials don't use this language when they talk about in a government report. It says they should get out of businesses by undoing regulations which are harmful, which are tantamount to micromanagement. And it also advocates systematic deregulation and the ease of doing business to boost growth and competitiveness. Yes, next. Now coming to artificial intelligence. It says that the collaborative efforts are needed between government, private sector, and academic staff to address AI-driven labor market transformations. Emphasis on self-education and skill development to prepare the workforce for AI-augmented jobs. And it also says that government should intervene if companies make large profits through use of AI by displacing labor. This is another sharp observation made by the chief economic advisor that government should be ready to impose taxes if necessary if private businesses make undue profits using AI and displacing labor. Research and development, private sector should increase its contribution to R&D to foster innovation and growth. In many developed and emerging economies, business enterprises contribute to over 50% to gross expenditure on R&D. In India, it is negligible what the private sector does. Most of the R&D is done by government only, the public sector. Next slide, please. Now, what are the major takeaways from the survey? If you ask, there are some 4 or 5 points which are very important. It says the vision of Viksit Bharat. Viksit Bharat means developed India. You must be knowing that. If the vision of Viksit Bharat is to be realized by 2047, why 2047? Centenary year. Centenary of our independence. By 24, that is the goal of the vision of the government, Viksit Bharat. If this is to be realized by 2047, sustained growth, 8% growth at constant prices, not current prices, constant prices. It is now 6.2. So at constant prices for a decade or two is absolutely necessary. That's what. So 2047, every year you have to have a growth of 8% at constant prices for at least 2 decades, which is a very, very tall order. Anyway, but we have to strive towards that goal. And India needs to improve global competitiveness through grassroots level structural reforms. Focus should be on systematic deregulation to bolster growth. While minimizing controls, we should adopt a minimum necessary, maximum feasible approach in setting regulations. And another takeaway is India needs a continued step up of infrastructure investment over the next 2 decades for growth. And as I pointed out earlier, the corporate sector has been given a task in the report. Corporate sector has to display a high degree of social responsibility, implying that they are not having that social responsibility now. They should display a high degree of social responsibility with regard to investment in infrastructure, expenditure on R&D, use of AI, ensuring expenditure on R&D, use of artificial intelligence, ensuring reasonable wages for workers. Now, the survey has pointed out that the private sector profit, private sector enterprises, profit has reached a 15-year peak. The last 15 years, they have not achieved so much profit. So 15-year peak, whereas the wage level of workers remains low. Unless the wages of workers are increased and more money is put in their pockets, it will not be possible for us to increase demand and then increase production and increase consumption, and thereby boosting the economy. So it is very important that the corporate sector has to contribute, has to play the role. And given the impact of global economic fragmentation on trade and investment, we must strengthen domestic growth levers to mitigate risk. This is another major takeaway from the book. You have to be self-reliant. You need not depend on the external markets. We have such a big market in India. We have to focus on that market. For that, you have to increase the wages of workers. You have to reduce your profits, increase the wages of workers, and then see that they spend more money on their needs, thereby improving the economy of the country. So this is about the economics. This is what the economic survey has said. It's a big report. It's running to 430 pages, and it also has a lot of statistics. But this is a very brief account of what the economic survey says. Thank you.